Good afternoon to the graduating class of 2019. My name is Paul Rohde. I'm the outgoing chair of economics. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the department's doctoral and master's graduation ceremony to celebrate with you and your family and friends and with our faculty. At this time of year, I usually look for a hook for my remarks, some kind of anniversary like a bicentennial or a poem to read, something like that. This year I was reduced to finding a prop, but let me cut to the chase. Congratulations on your wonderful achievements, and I'd like to thank you and your family for their support in making this possible. I'm a Michigan parent myself, and I know how important it is to have family to support people through. So let's give a round of applause to the friends and family. Now it is my great pleasure to welcome to the podium Linda Tizar, our outgoing Director of Graduate Studies. Linda?
Thank you, Paul. This is such a great day. It's been a long time in coming. I think I met all of you in the summer when you started as PhD students, and some of you I've met in my office, some more often than others, talking about your program of study and worrying about exams and how to be on track to get to where you are now. And many times in those conversations, something I find myself saying over and over again is, this isn't a race, but it is a marathon. And the finish line is now finally in sight. And I must say, we all are probably a little older and a little more tired, but we made it. So congratulations. The other thing I want to say, I brought a prop too. It occurred to me that I stole your idea. I brought a prop. I don't know if you all know, I didn't know until today, that the very first PhD in economics was granted in 1890. And it was by someone by the name of Frederick Charles Hicks. He wrote on foreign trade of the United States, a distinguished scholar who went on to become the president of the University of Cincinnati. And so I thought, gee, I wonder what dissertation titles look like 100 years later. And I found on our shelves up in Foster Library, 100 years later, a thesis with the title Essays in International Trade. So I guess we learned two things. One is that some problems are never fully solved. And secondly, we have a tremendous amount of determination because we don't give up. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Merve Sarashek, who is going to be our Master of Ceremonies. This is kind of a new tradition that we have one of your own participate in the ceremony and introduce you and your thesis advisors. So I'm going to sit down, but I'm going to first say congratulations. We're all exceedingly proud of you.
Welcome all, family, friends, faculty, and the backbone of the whole department, also known as the administrative staff, and my peers, University of Michigan economics PhD students. I'm honored to be part of this beautiful moment of your lives as someone who knows exactly how messy behind the scenes can look like. I like using this opportunity to explain our audience a little bit what life has been like as a graduate student, as I'm sure I'm not the only one who repeatedly gets asked by family and friends about why PhD takes this long, what exactly I'm working on, and if I'm still getting good grades. Yes, we spend most of our first couple years in the program studying and taking exams, but those are dark times that none of us wants to remember. Then comes the main part, the transition into becoming a researcher, which I believe can be best explained with an analogy. Although they appear like polar opposites, I always found art and science, or artists and researchers, more alike than different. The freedom to get to pick what you want to work on is one of the most exciting similarities between the two. In essence, both artists and researchers are striving to see the world in new ways, and both start with a vision. Once we determine a research question, our creativity and imagination take over. We try to find the best way to explain and express what we have envisioned. I'm confident when I say this. We spend a significant amount of time staring either at a computer screen or even just a white wall, really, contemplating. Just like a painter staring on a blank canvas, slightly worried and anxious. Creating something from the ground up that contributes to the society in any way takes months, sometimes years' work, and nothing less than perseverance, dedication, and passion takes you there. Once shared, our products are subject to criticism from all directions, but they're also likely to become a source of inspiration to others for future work, just like an art piece. It's a long and winding road, full of uncertainty, self-doubt, and never-ending cold Michigan winters. But here you are, on the other side of the tunnel, having officially mastered the art of becoming a researcher. On behalf of my and all the other cohorts, who are all looking up to you right now, I would like to congratulate each and every one of you. We are all wishing you good luck in your next chapter with the brand new degree you will now be awarded with. And without further ado, I would like to start calling my friends and their faculty advisors to start our ceremonies. I'm trying my best to have the pronunciations as good as possible, so apologies in advance if I make a mistake. Vaibhavi Balasundaram and her faculty advisor, Jagadish Sivdasan.
So first of all, I want to say congratulations to Vaibhavi. It's been a pleasure working with Vaibhavi over the last few years. And what's particularly special is that her work and the data she was using, finally after many years of working with many, many PhD students, someone was interested in what I had done, something similar to what I had done in my own PhD work. So it was great to work with her on that. What was unique about working with her was that most of the students who come to see me try to present the best possible face on what they have done. There's no errors, or everything is super robust and everything is great. With Vaibhavi, it was the opposite. I was in opposite world. I was trying to tell her work is good, and she was telling me how it was weak and wrong and not robust in 1,000 different ways. And so my terror when she was going on the market is she would continue to talk like that, and that wouldn't work great. But that is obviously completely wrong, and I know she had a super tempting offer that would have taken her away from research, and I was very happy that she stayed in research. I look forward to her future work and wish her all the best. Congratulations again.
William Boning and his faculty advisor, Jim Hines.
Some of you will remember the crash of 2008 and the recession that followed. The most notable aspect of which was there was a change in tax withholding during calendar year 2009. What Will's dissertation uncovers is that this change in tax withholding had a significant effect on payments by affected individuals. And that comes from his intensive study of income tax returns, and it's a really quite compelling and unique glimpse into what effect withholding has. That's not the only investigation that Will's dissertation undertakes. He also did a field experiment working with the IRS on what happens if an IRS agent comes to visit a business and talk with them about their tax compliance? The answer is they pay more. He also finds that if that business shares a tax preparer with another business, the other business pays more. And even finds a very small effect if the IRS sends you a letter. So again, very, very interesting evidence, and I think very useful as well. The final part of Will's dissertation looks at the effect of tax changes that affect the cash flow to businesses and looking at what effect that has on hiring and investment. And there we get the lesson that more money is better. Will, it won't shock you to learn at the end of this, finished a great dissertation and is off to the IRS next year. He's off to the Treasury, sorry, next year.
Ying-Jie Peng and his faculty advisor, Andreas Hagemann.
Hi. So Ying-Jie's dissertation has like 3 quite distinct parts. I'm only going to talk about one because that's already hard enough to explain. And it's on bin scatter. If you haven't heard of bin scatter, you will. We live in an age of big data, and the problem for us, I think, is visualizing very, very large data sets in a compelling way. Bin scatter is one of them, and it's been used extensively by economists, and it will be, people will continue to use it. And Ying-Jie's dissertation lays the theoretical foundations to actually, how to use this correctly. It corrects mistakes that we have made in the past. So I think we will actually hear a lot about Ying-Jie's dissertation in the future because it is an important piece of work. And as I said, it's not the only piece of work in his dissertation. There's lots more important research in there. And I'm excited to say he's gonna join Princeton University as a postdoctoral fellow. So he will, continue to produce great work, and I'm very much looking forward to reading that in the future. So congratulations.
Xing Guo and his faculty advisor, Matthew Shapiro.
Thanks. It's been a great pleasure working with Jing. He's done a great dissertation that combines macro evidence and micro evidence, equilibrium thinking. It's about the distribution of how firm size affects financing decisions and investment. And not surprisingly, heterogeneity matters. What small firms giveth, big firms taketh up. And you get very different findings by taking this to account. He's also applied this with some of his other advisors to macro modeling. We're delighted that he's going off to the Bank of Canada. I hope he learns how to ice skate on the canals of frozen Ottawa, where he will enjoy it and do us great credit.
Samuel Halton Hoff and his faculty advisor, Javier Trevino.
So first of all, I wanted to congratulate Sam, who's going to join Cornerstone next year. I met Sam a long time ago, like 5 years ago, and I worked with him in different capacities. He's been my TA, my head TA, my RA, and then my co-author, and then I've been his dissertation chair. He's excelled in all of these capacities. His dissertation studies how policy can affect how labor markets respond to trade shocks. He's been studying this using the match employee-employer data from Germany, and he's shown how these reforms in Germany, the harsh reforms, have affected labor mobility following the trade shocks. He has then used quantitative models to think about how this has affected welfare in Germany, and as well as completed 2 other chapters in his dissertations that are actually quite good as well. So he's been super productive. He's also won every teaching award that we give here in Michigan. And although he's not going to research, I'm sure these skills are going to serve you very well. So congratulations.
Molly Hawkins and her faculty advisor, John Bound.
I've been warned not to take as long as I would like. I could go on for hours. One thing I want to say, which hasn't been said so far, is my colleague Charlie Brown, really that's his name, likes to say that here we treat faculty advising as a village, not as an individual affair. And so I'm speaking, Molly has had lots of advice. Anyway, she has lots of good advisors that I admire them all and has learned from all of them. Molly has, unlike most students who come to the graduate program, her entire career here has been focused on a fairly narrow set of issues that motivated her when she came in. She's been interested in disability insurance. Recently, she expressed to me that one of the things that has motivated her in this research is the sense that people who claim that they're disabled probably suffer from limitations. Now, what I don't quite understand is whether Molly understood that that was the motivating belief I wanted to express in my PhD thesis 33 years ago. So it's I can't express in words, as I just showed. Okay, Molly's, we'll call it job market paper, because a lot of times there's a focus on a job market paper as well as there are other chapters in her dissertation. Her job market paper focused on a policy reform in Finland. You might say, why Finland? I'd say, why not Finland? But why Finland, the substantive reasons is that they changed their disability insurance program in Finland experience rates the program, which means that firms, the payroll tax on firms depends on how many people end up who were previously employed at a firm end up on disability insurance. One rationale for that is that firms have to, in some sense, pay for, or they have an incentive to hold on to workers and to accommodate workers who suffer for some kinds of limitations. What's important about this thesis is beyond that it's just interesting and Finland's an interesting place and all that stuff, is that people have proposed similar reforms in other countries, including the United States, and have argued that if we experience rating DI, disability insurance in the United States, it would slow down the growth of disability insurance. There are really big name professors who've advocated for this kind of things in the United States. Pick your big university, pick your Cambridge University that's just your favorite Cambridge University, whichever one of the ones it is, and somebody there will have been advocating for experience rating disability insurance in the United States. And they've claimed that it will slow down the growth of DI. What Molly did in her thesis, in her job market paper, is she took this change in the experience rating in Finland, and she showed that more experience rating had the effect of slowing down the growth or the flow onto Finnish disability system. But the other thing she showed was it discouraged firms from hiring people who were at high risk of becoming disabled. Why that's important for me is because the people who have been advocating for this in the United States have dismissed that as a possibility. Theoretically, yes, possible, but not likely to be important. What Molly did was she showed in the context of Finland that yes, this was a detectable, important phenomenon. So there were maybe benefits from more experience rating, but there were clearly costs. And I think that's a really big deal. In fact, when I wrote behind her back about this paper, I basically said I thought it was one of the most important papers that have been written in the field in the last decade. So I'm very...
Shinwei Ma and his faculty advisor, Andreas Hagemann.
So, Shinwei's dissertation, there's lots of contributions here. I think the one that's easiest to explain is probably in a situation where you have an intervention and you're interested in, like, you know, what's the outcome of that intervention for, like, sort of the average person. In a lot of situations, you have, like, you have the problem that, you know, maybe a lot of people receive treatment, or like maybe only very few people receive treatment. And in that situation, it turns out for us to back out what actually was the effect of the treatment, you sort of have to, like, divide by the probability of receiving treatment or not receiving treatment. And if that probability is small, it's a bit like dividing by 0, which we all kind of know that's not a very good idea. And so it turns out, so economists and econometricians in the past, we have simply sort of assumed away that problem. And Shinwei somehow managed to provide an absolutely exhaustive solution to this problem. So you might be wondering, well, so like maybe sometimes I don't know what's the probability of receiving treatment or not. Well, it turns out the work is so good that whether you know that or not, Shinwei's method can solve this problem. So this is important work. It's also like the other chapters of his dissertation are important work. Again, it's a bit hard to summarize here, but I'm very proud of Shinwei. He has been a part of sort of like, you know, this our econometrics group here for a couple of years now here, and he always felt a bit sort of like another faculty member. And so his insights, having him like in seminars and so on, it has been an important part of our group. It has been an important part of our seminar, and it is of absolutely no surprise to anyone that he will be joining one of like the meccas of econometrics. He will be joining the University of California in San Diego as an assistant professor in the fall. So congratulations, Shinwei.
So in case you haven't noticed, we're all very proud of our students, and we could talk about them for a long time. I'm just going to implore, since we're not even halfway through our students, I'm going to implore our colleagues to just be very brief, and it doesn't mean that we love you less. It just means we'll talk with you more later. So.
Meera Mahadevan and her faculty advisor, Linda Tisar.
So now I'm going to quickly take my own advice, and let me say, I'm not really her advisor. Her advisor is Ryan Kellogg, who very kindly, he's gone on to other places, but he sent a very nice set of comments, which I'm going to read right now. Meera's dissertation does an incredible job of showing just how important political patronage is in determining who gets allocated cheap electricity in India. She is creative and ambitious in the research she pursues, and she does not shy away at all from the hard work that has to be done to realize that ambition. For one, to write her dissertation, she had to develop command of not just one field of economics, but 3: energy and environmental economics, development economics, and political economy. On top of that, that, and maybe more practically, obtaining detailed customer-level electricity billing data from India, without which she couldn't complete her project, is no small feat. Mira made countless trips back and forth to India to meet with the utilities there, to try to convince them to give her the data, and I guess was successful in that. She never took no for an answer. She never gave up, and that's why she's here today.
Nikolas Morales and his faculty advisor, John Bound.
I remember, I think it was just over 7 years ago, when I got an email from Nikolas saying he accepted our offer to join the program at the University of Michigan. I was delighted. I was excited. What I saw in his application made me think he was going to come here and do great things. I underestimated him based on that, his file. He would come. The first year, I didn't have much contact with him. I would hear rumors about this guy in the first year who knew all the math, who all knew the economics, who helped everybody else. It was Nikolas. Then I hired him to do a kind of labor-intensive, data-intensive task. He did a great job at that. Then I stole him away from that task to work on another project that I thought would be more intellectually engaging for him. That produced a product that eventually would be picked up in the newspapers, Breitbart News, and the Hindustan Times. That's an accomplishment I think I will never replicate in my life. He made, given what he works on. He works on high-skilled immigration. Well, that's a lot of what he has worked on. He's done really important work in that area. Surprised that the big guns, at least in labor economics, who've worked on immigration, have treated the economies from which people emigrate, or the economies into which they immigrate, as closed economies. That means they're the only economy that exists in the world. Where these people are coming from, well, who cares? We're just focusing on what happens in the United States, or what happens in the Philippines, or what happens in Nikolas' work. He treats these economies as open economies. If you're coming, high-skilled workers are coming from somewhere, they're going to someplace, and that's going to have an impact on the U.S., it's going to have an impact on the sending countries, and it's going to have an impact on the trade between those two countries. What he shows is you treat economies as open economies. When looking at immigration, you can reverse the findings you find if you treat it as closed economies. This is important work. It's fabulous work. I expect to I learned a great deal from Nikolas along the way. He is incredibly good, and he's not obnoxious. And that's rare in economics. Molly's fine too. But anyway, so it's just been a delight to have Nikolas as a student, and I will miss him very much.
Kenichi Nagasawa and his faculty advisor, Andreas Hagemann.
Kenichi's work, or I think sort of at the center of Kenichi's dissertation is, I think, a question that a lot of you can sympathize with, is in essence it's about figuring out which school to send your kid to. And what Kenichi's work is here is it tells us, well, what is the effect of the school and your environment on, like, the outcomes of a student, maybe your child. So when you think about that, right, there's lots of things that can go on here. There's, you're a parent, you bring lots of, stuff, to your child, whether it's just through nature or through nurture. And so it's really hard to disentangle the effect, actually, of the school on that child. And it turns out, if you're lucky enough, there's something you can do. And Kenichi figured that out for us. It turns out there's a pattern, and if there's a pattern, you can back something out. And Kenichi has a very, very clever solution to this problem. And I think the word clever is something that I have used many times in the past to describe Kenichi and his work. His job market paper, the first main chapter of his dissertation, I think clearly shows that. The two other chapters are fantastic too. In fact, one of the papers is probably one of my favorite papers in the last couple of years of anyone. They're all incredibly clever, and I hope to see much more of that. We will see much more of that actually because Kenichi will join the University of Warwick in the UK as an assistant professor in the fall. So let's congratulate Kenichi on a job well done.
Owen Niem and his faculty advisor, Catherine Dominguez.
It's a real pleasure here to speak about Owen, who I've now known for, I think, about 6 years. Owen is a student who, when he comes to your office and talks about something, and then we come up with a new date for him to return, he comes back with at least 2 papers written based on what we've just talked about. So he is an amazing guy who can write up ideas incredibly quickly. His dissertation is mostly focused on capital controls, and the idea that he had was that instead of just looking to see whether or not these controls actually restrict the flows of capital across borders, whether or not they have an information effect on households and firms within the country. And in particular, he's looking at Brazil, and he finds that when Brazil either increases or decreases a control or restriction on capital, actually just having the information that they've made that change will improve your forecasts of future GDP for Brazil, which is kind of an amazing thing that he was able to disentangle this information effect. When he first came up with the idea, I was worried it would be hard to nail this down. He kept going, and he's actually ended up with a really impressive job market paper that I think helps us understand not just how the literal effects of capital controls can impact nations, but also how it can affect behavior, and in particular savings behavior by households. He also has other chapters in his dissertation on totally different topics, austerity and the positive effects of austerity. He is also, to my knowledge, the only graduate student who has ever actually read the Basel III banking regulations and translated them into Mandarin, which is really impressive. Owen is off to the World Bank, and I know we're going to hear a lot more about him in the future. Thank you.
Max Risch and his faculty advisor, Jim Hines.
Max has access to intrusive IRS tax records, and he's put them to good use. You might ask the question, if a business becomes more profitable to the owner, how much of the additional profits would they share with their workers? In an Econ 101 textbook, the answer is none. They would not share any of the additional profits with their workers. And I confess, if I were a business owner, I might be inclined to go with the textbook on that one. But what Max finds, looking in a very clever examination of the 2012 tax change and exploiting the data that he's got, that when business owners had less money because they had a tax increase, their employees did not get raises as quickly as other people's did. That in fact, it appears from the evidence that business owners share about 18% of any marginal profits with the workers. These are small-ish businesses with the workers who work for them. And once you have that insight, it turns out to make a lot of difference, not just to our understanding of tax policy, but also efficiency and a lot of other important things. That's not the only investigation in Max's thesis that exploits these really interesting data that he's got. He looks, after the crash of 2008, there was US legislation that increased the penalties and enforcement for people who were not reporting their foreign accounts. And there's a question of how much unreporting had been going on before that. And in Max's thesis, they look at the data and draw the inference that $100 billion had been unreported that was then subsequently reported. $100 billion by Americans. And I can tell you a few of those dollars were mine. So that's really the best source of information that we have on that kind of question. The final issue is that he looks at is the rise of independent contracting and how that's revealed in the tax data that we have. And the answer is there has been a rise in the US economy of independent contracting. Of course, the tax incentives for that have recently gone up with the 2017 bill, which is why I won't be teaching in the Michigan Economics Department anymore, but Jim Hines LLC will be. Max is off to Princeton for a postdoc, and we're sure quite great things after that.
Elçin Süleymano and his faculty advisor, Xiaowei Ke.
It's a great pleasure and to work with Elçin during the past few years. So Elçin is an exceptionally talented, creative, and hardworking young researcher. So during the past few years, he has completed 5 high-quality theory papers, including his solo job market paper, in which he introduces and characterizes a new model of non-Bayesian updating, and also a co-authored paper on random limited attention, which is now one of the best economics journal. That's among 5 other papers he has done. So I started working with Elçin closely during last year, and then Elçin, back then he was choosing his job market paper topic, and the topic he was selecting was kind of different from his previous work. So I was a bit worried because given the limited amount of time, starting a new topic might be very risky. But very soon I was surprised by how fast Elçin was able to master a new subject, both in terms of depth and also breadth. And also I was surprised by Elçin's creativity and also productivity. So let me summarize by quoting a sentence from Yusufjan, who is Elçin's advisor, but now in Maryland. So Yusufjan said, Elçin is without a doubt the best theory student I have seen in my 11-year tenure in Michigan, including students in Maryland. Congratulations.
Brendan Timpe and his faculty advisor, John Bound.
Something I should explain before talking about Brendan is that, that 7 years ago, I was chair of graduate admissions, which means all these people you see graduating right now are people who I admitted. And what is also, it turns out we get an incredible group of people applying to the graduate program. When I was chair, it was 800 a year. Virtually every one of those people looks like they could flourish here. And so it's a difficult job, and in the end, I at least, and I think it's true of other people who've been in my position, end up having a good deal of discretion. And so most of the people graduating this year, I actually remember when I admitted them. And I also believe that I wasn't our chair's first choice at this job. Maybe I was the 3rd or 4th. And so I sort of thought, I could, if I mess up, if this person doesn't turn out to be doing a good job during their program, he's going to come back and tell me, I knew you weren't any good. So it's a pleasure to see, for me, how well people have turned out. Brendan, I remember very clearly when I admitted him. His undergraduate field was not economics. He spent some time working as a reporter and doing other things before he started deciding he was going to become an economist. And that kind of resonated with me for a number of reasons, probably because that was my history, but also because I had the sense that this guy, he would basically understand the appeal of economics for somebody who wasn't an economist, which is important as a teacher, as also just in communicating things to people. But he would also understand the limitations of economics, which I can say is not true of all of us, maybe all the faculty now here, but it's not true of every economist in the universe, as you probably know. So this is Brendan as an applicant. He had all the credentials that everybody else had in terms of math, econ, research experience, but he had this other thing going for him too. So I was rooting for him from the get-go. Anyway, so over time, he's gone through the program. He's done well. I'm not his chair. Martha Bailey is his chair, but I'm on his committee. His job market paper focused on what he discovered was that through sort of kind of quirks in policy, the United States actually experimented with maternity leave policy that I guess a couple of decades ago because of the interactions of various laws in some specific states. So maternity leave is something that is a really hot topic, as I guess probably most of you know, at least in the United States, because the United States is probably the only developed country in the world that doesn't have maternity or paternity leave mandated. Lots of people are proposing that we should have mandated maternity leave like the rest of the developed world. And what Brendan shows in his job market, people I think thought there was no evidence for this exists in the United States because we don't have a mandated policy. So how could you tell what the impact was? He discovered that in fact because of interactions of several policies that several states had actually implicitly had an experiment for the impact of mandated maternity leave on outcomes. And what Brendan found in his thesis was that in fact it had what economic theory would predict would happen to the labor market opportunities for women. Economic theory isn't always right or maybe pointing in the right direction, but magnitudes are too small. Quantitatively important negative impacts on the labor market opportunities for women, and also suggestive evidence of long-run effects for the children born under these policies. So I think this is an important paper that I think has the potential for actually influencing the way some people who haven't already made up their minds about what the truth is, may have the chance of convincing them what's true.
Teju Velayudhan and her faculty advisor, Jim Hines.
So the country of India introduced a value-added tax, a national value-added tax, but as many countries, especially developing countries do, there was an exemption if your firm is small enough. Teju's, part of Teju's dissertation looks at what is the effect of the value-added tax and how burdensome is it? It turns out, it turns out that if you were required to file your value-added tax, comply with value-added tax if you had revenues of 10 million rupees or more, and a staggering number of Indian enterprises reported revenues of 9,999,000 rupees. Teju's thesis looks carefully at this pattern and interprets it, and we learn a lot about the effect of value-added taxes that way. Another part of her thesis looks at Americans and online purchases. Alas, if you haven't bought anything online recently, it is now the case that the vendors generally withhold tax when you buy online. That wasn't always the case. If you go back in the past, Americans had to pay sales tax on their online purchases. It's just you were kind of on your honor to do it. The question is that this part of Teju's thesis looks at is how many people actually did it. And of course, they're not going to tell you, but you can infer it. And it turns out not very many did it. When you look at voluntary tax collection agreements in the era before the Wayfair case, you find that online purchases drop precipitously when taxes are withheld by the vendors. The final part of Teju's thesis takes us to the country of Indonesia. Indonesia has hundreds of these provinces, and a number of them broke apart a few years back, so that they increased. It would be like American states breaking apart, you know, like Eastern and Western Michigan breaking apart. That happened in Indonesia. And one of the questions is, what effect does that have on bribe shakedowns by public sector officials for firms and other enterprises in their area? By breaking apart, you have more competition, but you have other things that go on too. And what Teju's thesis finds is that this increased competition did have an effect on bribe taking by local officials. Having learned about government officials taking bribes, Teju is going to be working in the public sector after graduation. She has a postdoc at Ohio State University for next year, and then after that will be an assistant professor at the University of California, Irvine.
And our last doctoral student, Pinghui Vu, and her faculty advisor, Dominique Bartelme.
Well, so congratulations to Pinghui. Pinghui was the very first student for whom I've served as chair on her committee. So she'll always have a special place in my heart that way. It was my very first year as an assistant professor here that Pinghui walked in my office and started talking to me about a research project looking at the heterogeneity in the impact of import competition on workers' prospects depending on the characteristics of their local labor market. And this would be her third year paper that she was thinking about. And unusually, perhaps, this turns out to be the first chapter, several years later, of her dissertation. Rather than describe it in more detail, what I'm just going to say is that what stands out to me about Pinghui's approach to economics is really the desire to combine the rigor of economic research methods and sort of the pressing nature of policy questions, and really practically looking at those questions that have a very practical implication and impact on people's lives. And she's going to be continuing to do that here at the University of Michigan at the Poverty Solutions program, and we're very happy to have her around for years to come. So congratulations, Pinghui.
So congratulations, PhDs. So now I'd like to have Alan Deerdorf come up and speak about our MAE program.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, I'm the director of our program for a Master's in Applied Economics. This is a two-year program that we have had for quite a long time. We started the program back in the mid-1970s. I don't remember the year exactly. We were certainly one of the first, if not the first, to have a program that develops students with the applied tools that they can then take out to the job. And it is not a predecessor for a PhD program. The point of it is to learn stuff, no offense to PhDs, that you can actually use on the job. And so we've been doing that for a long time, and we have a wonderful class again that is graduating today, and we'll introduce them in a few minutes. But let me just tell you a little bit about the class. We have 21 students graduating this year. 6 of them, I believe, are unable to attend this ceremony, so you won't see quite that many. They entered the program in the fall of 2017, with a few exceptions. They come from a bunch of different countries. We have students in the graduating class from the United States, from China, from Taiwan, Japan, Korea, South Korea, Germany, and Mexico. And a number of them are doing dual degrees. That's a very common thing among master's students at Michigan, not so much, although it's heard of, for PhD students. So we have students with dual degrees in engineering, particular kind of engineering, industrial and operations engineering, in data science, doing some dual degree or a graduate certificate program. We have them with the Masters in Public Policy in the Ford School, and also the Masters in Public Administration also in the Ford School. So a variety of things that they are doing. They don't necessarily tell us what they're doing. We want them to. Julie Hines is the administrator for this program, and she has, I'm sure, spent far more time with each one of you students than anybody else, probably. Maybe your professors in your courses would spend more, but anyway, Julie is so essential to this program. I don't quite understand how we could have been doing it since the 1970s without her, but while I've been director of it, we've had Julie. And she has been trying to get them to respond to a questionnaire to tell us where they're going and what they're going to do next. And we know for some of them, because they did respond, but many of them have not. So I'm working on whatever threat I'm going to hold over you if you don't answer the questionnaire. But anyway, we have learned that some of the graduates you're seeing here are going to be going to securities firms, Deloitte, a tax firm, risk management job in Tampa, and let's see, what have I got? Asset management company, and one has been admitted to another academic program. The program is not meant as a stepping stone for a PhD, but of course some students do decide to go on to another academic degree, and that's very fine as well. All right, we're going to call their names. They're going to come up. I'm not going to call the names. One of their professors who taught them statistics, Dr. Asenka Asenova. Got it. So she knows all of them, and they know her. He's going to read the names. She's been working on those as well. So as she does that, please come up here. I'll hand you a little folder and shake your hand, and we're going to take your picture. And then you'll shake the hand of Paul as well. You're supposed to get up. Sit over here. That's your part.
Paula Avila Palomares. Shinhe Bao. Yo Ning Chan. Bailey Han. Chun Yu Ho. Yor Ho. Yejun Lee. Yichun Lin. Chan Lo. Guanzhang Lu. Yo Togami. Timothy Trollope. Xiao Yan. Jin Yang. Sorry, next. Sija Yu.
Let me say a couple words. Partly because I forgot to tell you that one of the graduates that just went through, Yuning Chung, was the student leader of the group through 2018 and played an important role for providing things for the students to do in their off hours and in their on hours. So we thank him very much. And then I just want to congratulate everybody because I was too busy doing other things to do it. So let's give them one last round of applause.